Some war films shock you, others inspire you, but Hacksaw Ridge is one of the rare few that does both at the same time. It plunges you into the raw brutality of World War II, and right in the center of that chaos stands a man who refuses to carry a weapon. Yet, he saves more lives than anyone else around him. This is the story of Desmond Doss, a man whose courage wasn't measured by how many enemies he killed, but how many friends he saved. A man whose faith was so strong, his principles were so unshakable, that not even the horrors of Okinawa could break him and his vow. Today, we're going deep into his story, into the movie, into the real Desmond Doss, into the filmmaking, the historical accuracy, and into the legacy that he left behind. This won't just be a recap, but an exploration, a reflection of one of the most extraordinary war stories ever told. But to understand Desmond, we need to understand the world he stepped into. Because World War II wasn't just a conflict, it was the deadliest event in human history. More than 70 million people died. Entire cities were destroyed. Soldiers on both sides faced unimaginable horrors. And for the United States, the Pacific Theater, where Desmond would eventually serve, was uniquely brutal. The Japanese military fought with a different mindset than the Germans. No surrender, no retreat, no mercy. There were suicide charges, hidden tunnel systems, booby traps, and snipers who waited hours for a single shot. When American troops heard they were headed into Okinawa, many knew they were marching into hell, and likely death. And right in that era, that culture of brutality and kill or be killed, arrived a man who refused to touch a gun. To understand why Desmond was so committed to his beliefs, the film starts by showing his childhood, but the real story is even deeper. Desmond grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, under two powerful influences, his religious faith and his father's alcoholism and PTSD, both of which are shown in the movie. His father, a World War I veteran, saw the worst trench warfare, mustard gas, machine guns, mass graves, and he returned home broken, angry, and buried in survivor's guilt. This upbringing gave Desmond two lifelong beliefs. The first being, of course, life is sacred. The second, violence destroys everything it touches. These weren't abstract ideas for him. He lived them. One moment sealed this fate, though. As a young boy, Desmond nearly killed his brother in a fight. His mother showed him a poster of the Ten Commandments, and he zeroed in on "Thou shalt not kill." The guilt consumed him. That event changed him forever. But Desmond wasn't just mildly religious. He was deeply committed to his Seventh-day Adventist beliefs. That includes observing the Sabbath, avoiding violence, following biblical principles literally, and treating every human being as a child of God. But the key point here is that Desmond wasn't a pacifist because he was soft. His beliefs made him stronger, not weaker. Now, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, Desmond didn't hide and he didn't run. He didn't avoid his duty. He volunteered immediately. This is a crucial part of his story that the movie gets right. He wanted to serve, and he wanted to save lives, and he wanted to do his part. But he wanted to do it without breaking the vow that he made to God and himself. The Army had never dealt with somebody like him, and that's what makes this story so interesting. Now, in this section of the film, and of Desmond's real life, it's the emotional heartbeat, it's the emotional heart before the violence begins. Desmond's refusal to touch a weapon made him immediately stand out. The Army didn't have a box to put him in. Was he a liability, crazy, delusional? His fellow soldiers thought he was putting their lives in danger, and in their world, trust is survival. They called him a coward, took his blanket, beat him, mocked his faith, and tried to break him. The film shows this, but real life was much worse. Desmond was actually threatened with discharge, psychological evaluation, and jail time. Now, the pivotal cinematic moment is when they order him to pick up a rifle and he refuses. They think he's disobeying orders, but he believes he's obeying God and his orders. This is the internal conflict that makes Desmond one of the most unique protagonists ever in war cinema. Because he's not fighting the enemy, he is fighting the system. fighting the stigma, and fighting to serve in his own way and do his part. One of the most dramatic sequences is a mock courtroom drama, but the real story is even crazier. See, his father, a broken, traumatized World War I veteran, risked imprisonment to convince his colonel not to court-martial his son. He barged into the hearing, he delivered a letter from a powerful officer, and he saved Desmond's military career. In a twisted way, the violence Desmond saw in his father became the thing that rescued his mission. And this is a very heartfelt moment in the film because it shows that his father, what kind of man his father truly is without his ailments. So, of course, Desmond wins, but not through force, and not through manipulation either, but through sheer conviction. He is officially allowed to serve as a combat medic, unarmed. And then, of course, this is where the real story begins. Everything in the film builds to one of the most gruesome, intense, realistic depictions of war ever captured on screen. The island was strategically crucial in this part of the Battle of Okinawa. As I briefly mentioned before, the Japanese were entrenched in bunkers, caves, and tunnels, and the terrain was a natural fortress that aided them. The Americans had to scale a 75-foot cliff known as I'm going to mispronounce this, but the Maida Escarpment, or in other words, Hacksaw Ridge. The first wave barely survived. Desmond climbed the rope tower ladder, knowing full well he might never come down. Now, Mel Gibson's direction really shines here in this part of the movie. The chaos is disorienting because real battle is disorienting. The explosions aren't cinematic, but they're messy and real. You see, because limbs fly, men scream, and bodies are burning. In the real battle, artillery was so intense, soldiers couldn't hear their own screams. Machine gun nests tore entire groups apart in seconds, and the Japanese used shock attacks at night, charging with bayonets. They hid beneath corpses and popped up to attack medics first. This wasn't a normal war, it was total, merciless annihilation. And amid this hellscape, Desmond does the unthinkable. He runs toward the wounded and not away. He exposes himself to sniper fire. He crawls through the mud, blood, and body parts, and he refuses to leave anyone behind. Soldiers described him as fearless and supernatural. One even is quoted by saying, "He stayed up there when everyone else retreated." This is where his mantra begins. "Lord, please help me get one more." This line wasn't invented for the movie. Witnesses heard him say it over and over, all night long. Now, when the Americans retreated after a devastating counterattack, Desmond stayed behind alone, as the soldier said. For 9 straight hours, he worked in darkness, lit only by fire, explosions, and moonlight. He treated wounds using whatever he had left. This includes torn shirts, bandages ripped from dead soldiers, morphine he scavenged, and prayer. Desmond created a makeshift rope harness and lowered wounded men down the 75-foot cliff one at a time. Eyewitnesses described how insane this was. Japanese snipers were firing at him. He was dragging bodies through mud. He crawled 100-plus yards repeatedly, and he ignored his pain, exhaustion, and fear. Each time he got a wounded soldier to the edge, he whispered, "One more." And he would go on to do this 75 more times. Now, Doss insisted he only saved 50, but his officers insisted he saved 100. So they compromised on 75 for the citation. Now, this next part is something the movie touches on, but not fully, because Desmond was eventually wounded by a grenade. He still refused stretcher bearers, telling them to help others first. When he was on a stretcher, he saw another soldier worse off and rolled off to give him the stretcher. Then he crawled to safety. Later, he was shot by a sniper through the arm. He splinted his own shattered limb with a rifle stock, the only time he ever touched a gun. The army had mocked him, isolated him, beaten him, and tried to force him out, now refused to go into battle without him. On May 5th, 1945, the day after his night of heroism, Desmond couldn't fight because it was the Sabbath. His entire unit delayed their advance until he finished praying. Soldiers said morale was higher when Desmond was with them, and when he wasn't, they felt exposed. This is reverence usually reserved for generals, not medics, and certainly not unarmed medics. Now, in October 1945, Desmond Doss received the Medal of Honor from President Harry Truman, and where Truman said, "You're the bravest man I've ever met." But Desmond didn't see himself as a hero. He lived humbly on a farm, he rarely spoke about the war, and he never profited from his fame. He remained the same simple, faithful man he was before the war, and he would die in 2006 at the age of 87. Now, what makes Hacksaw Ridge stand out artistically? The first thing that I noticed, at least, was the brutal realism paired with the spirituality of Desmond. You get scenes of horrifying violence immediately followed by moments of reflection, prayer, or moral resolve, and the contrast heightens both. The second, of course, is Andrew Garfield's performance as Desmond Doss. He plays Desmond with gentleness, innocence, and spiritual strength without making him feel like a caricature or completely unbelievable. It feels honest. The third is the sound design, because, like I mentioned previously, you have the shriek of incoming mortars, the dampened ringing in Doss's ears, bullets snapping overhead, bodies hitting the ground. It just immerses the viewer more than typical Hollywood action scenes. The fourth is the theme of conviction. The film isn't about pacifism versus violence, it's about conviction versus conformity, about staying true to yourself even when the world pushes back and tells you you're wrong, which is not an easy thing to do by any means, but in my opinion, it is something worth taking away from this movie, if you take anything away. Number 5 is a new kind of war hero, because instead of glorifying the kill count, it glorifies the life-saving count. This flips the entire war movie genre on its head, and in my opinion, it's the first time that I ever saw a movie that has actually done this, like a war movie that has actually done this. Desmond Doss entered the war without a weapon, and he left a legend. He didn't compromise, he didn't waver, and he didn't go into fear. He didn't give in to fear. He simply asked for the strength to save just one more. And in doing so, he reminded the world that courage doesn't come from guns. It comes from conviction. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you stuck around this long, I really do appreciate it. It means a lot. I just wanted to make a quick little video about this movie because I love it so much. So hopefully you guys found it interesting. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you haven't seen this movie, I seriously recommend you watch it. I really don't think you'll regret it. It's one of Andrew Garfield's best performances, in my opinion. And every time I watch it, it still hits the exact same. So definitely worth the time. But until next time, I will see you guys in the next video.